Hello and welcome to Marine Science Day. My name is Ali Hall and I will be your host for this session. I have the pleasure of introducing FeiDa, a VIMS graduate student who will be discussing ocean acidification and oysters. Now, without further ado, I will turn it over to Fei.
Thank you so much, Ali, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Marine Science Day this year. My name is Fei, and I'm a PhD student here working with Dr. Marjorie Friedrichs on ocean and coastal acidification. And today I will just share some research has been done by our group. And first, I just want to quickly share something I really like since I'm a kid, Pokemon. You may know this world famous yellow-red Pikachu. And over the past 20 plus years, over 8 different species of Pokemon has been introduced into the game series. One of them is called Corsola, which on the left here introduced in 1999. And it is a Pokemon based on coral. However, in 2019, there's another species of Corsola introduced to the game. However, this time it became a ghost type. The idea behind this ghost type Corsola is the loss of world's ocean, the coral reefs in world's ocean because of the change in water quality. The primary reason for the loss in coral reefs are due to water temperature increase and also the increase in ocean acidity, both of which are related to water quality. So what is water quality? There are many different parameters we can look into, such as temperature, salinity, sediment, oxygen, nutrients. One example is salinity, which is the salt content of the water. You can see that from the map on the right. This is a map of Chesapeake Bay showing the salinity. Chesapeake Bay is located on the eastern coast of the United States. So in this figure, blue color means salinity is very low, and red color means salinity is high. Fresh water usually has very low salinity, 0, and open ocean such as Atlantic Ocean here has higher salinity. Different marine species, they prefer different salinity range. For example, clams, they prefer higher salinity range, and oyster, they prefer like intermediate range. Some fish species such as striped bass, especially at their early life stage, they prefer lower salinity. Any change in this water quality could impact marine organisms. So that's why we are trying to understand more about water quality. And today I will be talking about another water quality issue, that's acidification in ocean and coastal water. The parameter related to this topic is pH. So what is acidification? I think to me, the most straightforward definition is the increase in ocean acidity. One measurement of ocean acidity is using the parameter pH, which is related to hydrogen ion concentration in the water, H+. So when the water becomes more acidic, that means we have more hydrogen ion in the water, and this makes the water pH become lower. So more acidic water has lower pH, and the lower pH, decrease in pH, we call that acidification. Why do we care about lower pH and acidification? Because for some marine organisms, such as oyster, under lower pH conditions, they may require more energy to form and maintain their shells. Therefore, the energy left for them to grow their tissues will become less. Therefore, the size of the oyster may be smaller under acidification conditions. However, the primary reasons of decreasing pH acidification is different in different ecosystems. First, I want to talk about acidification in open ocean. So in open ocean, the acidification is primarily caused by the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide, the CO2 in the air. The CO2, they can dissolve in the water and react with water molecule H2O and release hydrogen ion. If you remember from previous slide, more hydrogen ion means the water becomes more acidic and has lower pH. So increase in air CO2 is the primary reason of acidification in open ocean. And this CO2, since Industrial Revolution, Lots of them are related to human activities, such as the combustion of fossil fuels, deforestation. All those can contribute to the increase in air CO2, eventually leading to acidification in open ocean. We have some evidence to show this in real life. Here is a figure showing a couple of different lines, but first I'd like you to focus in on the red line, which is the CO2 data collected at Mauna Loa in Hawaii. So this is showing the air CO2 concentration. From 1955 to 2018, you can see that air CO2 has been increasing from around 320 to over 400 in the atmosphere. Related to that, we can see pH reduction in the ocean, which is acidification. That is showed by the blue line, which has showing that pH has been decreasing continuously over the past several decades. This is in open ocean. Air CO2 is the dominant driver. However, if we come to coastal region where lots of people live, the story can be more complicated because we are not only facing the increase in air CO2 globally, there's also impact from the river. So for example, over the past 2 years, our group did a study to looking into acidification in the Chesapeake Bay. We found that the global driver increasing air CO2 and the local driver, the change in riverine nutrient, are the two dominant drivers contributing to acidification in the Chesapeake Bay. This is likely true for other coastal water bodies because in coastal regions, there's lots of human impacts. For example, the urbanization, agriculture, all those can release nutrients into the water from the river. The reason why our group one of the reasons why we are interested in acidification in the Chesapeake Bay is because of the oyster industry here. The map on the left in brown color shows the oyster grounds. This oyster grounds provides protections and foods to other marine species, such as striped bass, especially at their early life stages. So it's very important to maintain the oyster grounds. Additionally, oyster industry is very important to local economy. The value of Virginia's oyster industry in 2018 exceeds $14 million. And this number is expected to increase in the future because of the growth in aquaculture. However, the situation in the future may not look promising in terms of acidification because this is on the left is a similar figure I showed before, the increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration. And this trend is expected to continue in the future. What is more alarming is that the increasing rate is becoming faster and faster. The figure on the right here, each bar represents the increase in air CO2 compared to previous year. We can see that there is a clear trend that the increase per year is getting larger and larger. So it means we have faster increasing rate in air CO2. So this this increase in air CO2 will continuously decreasing water pH have some impact on marine organisms such as oysters. However, there are many ways we can do to help slow down the increasing air CO2. One of the biggest component is for industry to improve the technology, try to reduce their carbon emission. Personally, in our daily life, we could try to turn off the lights when there's no one in the room, using more environment-friendly transportation tools, and do some recycle. For our group and at VIMS, we are trying to understand more about acidification in the Chesapeake Bay. And in collaboration with another group, Dr. Emily Rivest, we are trying to understand what's the impact of acidification on marine organisms, such as oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. One of the examples of our group's work is to provide water quality forecast using computer models. You may be familiar with this weather forecast. Here is an example of the trajectory of hurricane. This kind of information can be very helpful for people to make early decisions. And as I said, our group provides water quality forecast. If you scroll down your web page, you can see a link that will lead you to the water quality forecast. And feel free to check out that anytime. And on the website, we provide like different water quality parameters, such as salinity, temperature, oxygen, and also pH. Oxygen information can be important for fishermen because they can use oxygen maps to avoid low oxygen region where fish are unlikely to stay there. Related to acidification, we also have a pH forecast. Here is an example of a pH forecast in the Chesapeake Bay. Warmer color means lower pH and cooler color means higher pH. And this is a screenshot I grabbed yesterday from my phone. And also on the website, we also provide the forecast in the next couple of days and also the trend, which is the change in pH in the next couple of days. This information, this kind of map has a lot of information. For example, we know which part of the bay has lower pH, which part of the bay has higher pH. And for oyster farmers and also oyster hatcheries, they may also want to use this kind of information to help them make decisions. However, there's some knowledge gap in terms of pH. For example, we are not so sure like if pH is 7.5, is that low for oyster farmers or is that low for oyster hatcheries or both? So we are trying to understand the threshold of acidification. For example, when and where this kind of threshold in acidification we may exceed. And also working with some social scientists from Oregon State University, we are hoping to provide information that's required to help people to adapt to these stressors such as acidification in the future. Just want to quickly give an example of pH forecast. On the left here, I'm showing the bottom pH forecasted by our model on September 5th, 2019. So this is before a Hurricane Dorian. In the middle, it's the bottom pH forecasted after the hurricane. And on the right, it's the change in bottom pH forecasted between and after the hurricane. We can see the change in pH after hurricane. Red color means pH increase after hurricane, and the blue color means pH decrease after hurricane. This is useful information because we know exactly what's the change in pH gonna be after the hurricane. However, what we don't know if this, for example, decrease in pH would push us exceed the acidification thresholds. So that's the information we are trying to understand now with this new project. And hopefully next year we could have more results on this this study. And please join us if you have time next year too. And in summary, in the open ocean, air CO2 increase is the primary reason for acidification. And in coastal water, the story can be more complicated because of the change in river input, especially related to human activities on land. So here at VIMS, we are trying to understand more about acidification and their impacts on organisms. And as a Pokemon fan, I'm happy to see different species like ghost type Pokemon, but in the future, I'm also interested to see if we will see some stronger Pokemon, stronger coral-based Pokemon. And with that, I'd like to thank my advisors here at VIMS, Marty Friedrichs and Pearson Laurent, and also the collaborators working on this project to understand more about acidification, its threshold, and their impact on people and the organisms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fei. That was incredible. So this first question comes from Imani, and they would like to know, do you know any ways to reduce CO2 and acidification in waterways?
Decrease CO2 or acidification?
In waterways, yep.
In waters. Yeah. So I think the most straightforward way is try to reduce the, from the source, like reduce the emission of CO2 into the air. For example, using renewable energy for industry, especially if you use renewable energy, that would reduce like carbon emission, and try to recycle more, also reduce CO2 into the air. That eventually will lead to slow down the acidification in the water. For for like oyster hatcheries, they could add some materials like calcium carbonate to increase the pH if they feel like the water pH is too low for their hatcheries. So there are different ways. I think the source is to reduce the CO2 in the air. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question comes from Jonathan, and they would like to know, how does pH vary with depth?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is for example, in Chesapeake Bay, pH generally decrease with depth, especially in the deep channel. At surface, because lots of growth in, like we have lots of algae growing, they use CO2 in the air, in the water, that can make pH higher at the surface. When we go to depths, because of the respiration, like just like human, when we respire, we release CO2 to the water that decrease pH. So generally, pH becomes lower when we go to deeper water.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you for that insight. Yeah. I have a question of my own, if I could pose it to you, Fei, which is that, do oysters in acidified waters, do they actually grow smaller or do they grow slower? And so it would take them longer to get to that max size?
That's a great question. Personally, I'm not a marine biologist, so I'm not so sure, but I feel like it's kind of both of the reasons are important. Like they grow slower and take more energy for them to maintain their shells. So like maybe their tissues will be smaller. Yeah, so we may don't have like those like larger fatty oysters. Yeah.
That's the biologist in me asking. Our next question is from Lori, and they would like to know, is this trend unique to the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic region, or is it found in other parts?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So pH reduction, overall in the world's ocean, we see reducing in pH. One of the primary reasons is the increase in air CO2. So it's not unique here in the Chesapeake Bay and Mid-Atlantic. Like in the West Coast, like in, lots of the world's ocean, we see decrease in pH. But here in Mid-Atlantic, what's different is we have lots of human influence on the land, like urbanization, agriculture. All those can contribute to change in river input. Those can also impact pH and impact acidification. That's what's, that's another reason. But overall, I think in the world's ocean, we are seeing acidification mostly. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. The next is from Sarah, and they ask, is too much pH bad?
Hi, Sarah. pH, like if we have very high pH, I think for every organism, there should be the range they prefer. Like there's like, for example, from this to that, that's their preferred pH range. If pH becomes too high, I think there should be causing other issues on organisms. So that'd be best to keep the environment be natural and reduce the perturbation from like different human influence. I think that's the best. Yeah.
Our next question is from Bill, who asks, is the benefit of seagrass beds material in terms of sequestering carbon dioxide and reducing acidification? So is the benefit of seagrasses are some of the benefits that they sequester carbon dioxide and reduce acidification?
Yeah, that's a very great question, Bill. I just want to give an example again for Chesapeake Bay. Like in over past couple of decades, there has been some recovery in seagrass. Related to that, in the upper Chesapeake Bay, we see some increase in pH. So it is likely that the recovery of pH, like you said, sequestering the CO2 can help slow down acidification. That's very important. Another point I want to mention is that for seagrass, at daytime they can absorb CO2, but at night when they respire, they could also release CO2. So we may see larger changes over one day, like higher CO2, higher pH in the daytime, but lower pH in the at night. But overall, I think, yeah, I think it could be helpful by sequestering the CO2. Yeah.
Yeah, I love to hear about the coupling of physical and biological things working together. Very cool.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Cassandra, and they ask, can any diseases come from acidification?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer actually. Hopefully next year we could have some students or researcher from Dr. Emily Ravi's group to help answer this question. Or yeah, there are some, I don't know if low pH could induce this disease. Yeah, sorry about that.
Lovely. Yeah, if anyone isn't aware, VIMS is separated into departments. So we have physical and biological and even a disease and pathology group as well. So it can be really cool for people to collaborate between those between the multiple departments. Well, lovely. Thank you, Fei, so much for being here and helping us learn about your team's work on ocean acidification and oysters. And thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.